Romeo and Juliet, catch up, Act 3, Scene 1. Right, so this is obviously the centre of the play. This is the key scene. The first thing to notice about this is that it is directly juxtaposed, that's deliberately put next to for effect, with the wedding. So we get love and hate right next to each other. Okay. Now it starts with Benvolio and Mercutio talking. Benvolio is talking about the heat. He talks about the way that it's going to build up the dangers of a conflict. And so therefore he kind of like sets up a mood, a feeling of danger. And I think the idea that heat makes the mad blood stir suggests that people are getting a little bit out of hand because of it. Mercutio instead becomes just basically starts a little jokey session with him, really, where he starts claiming that Benvolio is one of these people who tells everyone to be quiet, be safe, and actually is the worst himself. I don't think he means this in any way at all, but it's a wind up. That's basically what it is. He's enjoying winding up Benvolio, who basically falls for it. Am I like this person? You know, he's not really, he seems to be easily wound up. Now, before us can go any further, of course, as Benvolio worried would happen, in come the Capulets led by Tybalt. And his fears are there quite clearly. By my head, here comes the Capulets. But Mercutio responds by saying, by my heel, I care not. Now, why doesn't he care? What put him in this mood? I think that's what I would get you to think about to yourself here. Why is he ready to provoke a fight so easily? Well, whatever it is, he does it pretty quickly. As soon as Tybalt comes in and asks for a word with them, because of course he's looking for Romeo, Mercutio charges him to make it a word and a blow. Trying to be polite, Tybalt's trying to be polite, but he shows aggressively he's just going to go for a fight. Okay. Mercutio carries that on. Eventually, Tybalt gets fed up and attacks him for his connections with Romeo, using the word consortis. Now, a consort was a group of musicians, but of course, it also suggests hanging out with somebody very, very closely, and therefore you can see that his suggestion is almost one of what is this relationship between you two? Yeah. Again, another way of winding up. And this works for Mercutio, who gets very upset by this and pulls out his sword. He draws his sword first. Once again, Benvolio takes on the role of the peacemaker. This seems to be his role all the way through. He didn't want them to be out there to begin with here. He was the same in the first scene of the play. Benvolio literally means wants good, but it has no effect on Mercutio at all. Men's eyes were made to look, I will not budge for no man's pleasure. Look at the sheer arrogance that comes across from Mercutio here in spoiling for the fight. Now, once again, then Shakespeare changes things by the dramatic entrance of Romeo at this point, which of course changes everything with Tybalt. Ready to fight he was, well, peace be with you, because here's my man. Here's the person I want. It's important to be aware that that leaves the situation where Mercutio is up for the fight in the first place and has been pushed to one side. He carries on trying to wind up Tybalt after this, but also we're aware of the difficulties of the situation. Tybalt, we know, has issued a challenge to Romeo, but we're also aware that Romeo has literally just married Tybalt's close cousin. So when Tybalt starts off with a statement intended to basically fulfill that challenge and set that challenge again, the love I bear you can give you nothing better than the idea that you are a villain. We are dealing with the idea of hate straight away. And that, of course, is going to be immediately contrasted with Romeo talking about the reason that he has to love Tybalt. The juxtaposition again of hate and love. Now, we know what Romeo's talking about, but of course, imagine what that sounds like to Tybalt. The reason I have to love you. Tybalt's not put to one side. He starts calling him boy. Okay? He starts talking down to him. And this becomes a theme, actually, that Tybalt sees him as a boy, and therefore not of huge importance, just to be taught a lesson. But Romeo continues, saying that he loves him better than he can devise. Now, of course, the whole point, as we know here, is Romeo is doing what he should do. He's backing off, saying, I'm not fighting you. And the reason is because I love you. I am a member of your family, good Capulet, whose name I tender as dearly as mine own, because it is now, because I'm part of your family. Trouble is, no one else knows this. Now, of course, the idea is, it seems pretty clear that Romeo was coming to tell Mercutio about what's just happened and bring him in. But of course, by the time, as soon as he gets to Mercutio, Tybalt's there, and so he doesn't get the chance to. And so Mercutio doesn't understand this, calls it a calm, dishonorable, vile submission. Okay? So again, this idea of masculinity that comes in here. What a vile, horrible submission this is from you. And so he decides to take Romeo's place and start this fight again. Tybalt, as always, is quite happy to do so. You know, we see that he never backs down. And so the fight is set up. Romeo takes on the role that we saw Benvolio in before. Of course, he sees the potential tragedy of them, does everything he can to stop it, steps between them. So, you know, Shakespeare doesn't often use stage directions that much, but look at the way that he uses these to make clear that Romeo's physically getting in the way, and it is, I'll say his fault. It might be a bit harsh there, but it certainly is a result of his action that Mercutio is stabbed. This leaves us with Mercutio then, as Tybalt runs off dying. We get the famous line in which that he repeats, "A plague on both your houses," he keeps repeating there. Eventually they've made worms meat of me. The repetition, again, showing us the problem, the kind of the way that fate is working through the families. It's their fault, their silly dispute. I mean, having said that, it's a bit rich, really, because he did start the fight, but there you are. Anyway, it's important, of course, that Mercutio carries on in character, saying, oh, no, it's just a scratch, it's just a scratch. And then later I'm making a joke about it not being as deep as a well or wide as a church door. And telling them, if you ask for me tomorrow, you'll find me a grave man. Still joking to the end. Playing on the idea of a grave, and grave meaning serious. However, this is peppered with the reality of a plague of both your houses all the time. So it's a complicated thing, really. Towards the end, he's shouting abuse, he's angry at them, but he still keeps his humour to the end. It's a strange way of showing that he dies. Luckily, you probably won't have to talk about Mercutio that much. Left alone, Romeo is devastated and blames his love for Juliet, having made him effeminate and tempering the steel of his valor, tempering his sword of bravery here. Once again, it's this idea of masculinity coming in My masculinity has been affected. I've become effeminate because I've spent so much time with Juliet and her beauty. And here comes the real horror. When he hears Mercutio's dead and Tybalt comes back, we get his declaration that fire-eyed fury is going to be his conduct now. This is where we see the anger that you might say is the reverse side of his passionate love. It's another side of the passion that he showed positively before. Tybalt still referring to him as a boy, which shows how he feels about it. They fight and Tybalt dies. Romeo quickly realizes what he's done and finishes with this exclamation before he runs off, "I am fortune's fool." He blames it on fate. And he talked about fate during here, but again, just like Mercutio and his plague on both your houses, we might well stop here and say, no, Romeo, this is nothing to do with fate. It's you and your decision. But that's opened for us. The scene kind of then comes to an end. This very, very important scene comes to an end. Few citizens come in chasing after Tybalt and then find him dead. They go and get the prince, and we get this exchange about what actually happened. Well, what should we notice here? Well, I think all these O's from Lady Capulet show that somebody who hasn't shown much passion has real genuine emotion at this death. It reminds us that he may have been a horrible villain, but he was a real person. Benvolio tells the story, generally true. If you look closely, there's a few adjectives that he throws in that just put Tybalt as the villain, Mercutio as a brave fighter. So when Lady Capulet says affection to the Montagues makes him false, he speaks not true. She's probably quite right. However, the prince points out, well, look, Romeo killed him. Yes, he killed Mercutio. So who's going to pay for Mercutio's blood? Montague tries to dip it and say, well, that proves that nothing should happen to Romeo. He's just carrying out the law. But the prince doesn't take it. The prince is very definite and very clear in what he wants. We're exiling him, pointing out that he now, remember Mercutio was a kinsman of his, he now has suffered. Okay, reminding ourselves that others suffer for this feud between the two of them. A dramatic end to a dramatic scene.